Volgens gebruik aan de Radboud Universiteit.
And according to how we do things at this university, we begin this academic ceremony with a short prayer. Spiritus Sancti, gratia illuminet, sensus et corda nostra. You may be seated. A warm welcome to you all at this start of the academic year. People at home, and there are some people immediately involved, fortunately here with us in the room. And this is the third academic year, which will be largely guided by, unfortunately, the coronavirus. Usually some 1,200 people might get into this room, and with entry tests, some 750. We thought 2 weeks ago that we might have the 750, and with other rules and regulations, 300. But because it is an educational activity, or has been earmarked as such, we can only have a few people here. But fortunately, many of us hopefully attend us from home. And although the virus will guide our lives for a little bit longer, I'm very happy that we can have education back on campus. Students talking with lecturers, everybody talking together, studying together. That is how it was meant to be. But it also comes with responsibilities. So I would call again on you to keep to the rules, stick to the rules, and especially students, please. We run a big risk, even if we test twice per week. I did test this morning and I've been vaccinated. And of course, it's wonderful that people have been vaccinated. And if you're not, please get those vaccinations. But still, you will run an extra risk and pose an extra risk if after a week among your friends you go home again, for example. But let's not look too long at what we cannot do, because we can go back to studying together. And that is great. And it's also made possible by the efforts of many students as well, because we know that over 90% of our students has had themselves vaccinated. That's a high percentage, and they usually stick to the rules as well. And so I would say continue like that. It gives great trust, and great trust also that in the coming months we will be given more opportunity to breathe, that we will be able to do more things together, and this will be a fantastic academic year, improving education, seeking once again our connection to the city, our collaboration with the ROC and with the other universities, a fantastic academic year for all of us, hopefully. Thank you. On our program for this opening are a number of different elements. We have some speakers, students who will show us cultural activities, because studying is not just books, it's also definitely other activities as well, and we will see some, and I'm very happy that we have Esther Gerritsen, who is author and will speak to us today. In addition, there are a number of awards which we will award, or we've actually already awarded them, but we're going to show you the award winners. And we will start with the University Educational Awards.
So what I think the perfect subject consists of is an interesting subject. You need a personal story and you need a way to engage students. So I think the winner of the University Education Award for Talent has really done so. He tells you personal stories about his career in the military and really teaches everything there is to know about crisis management and other aspects that are concerned with this topic. And by doing so, he really makes you as a student emerge into his subject and really get to know what he wants you to know. And I think that is the perfect way of teaching.
What's also really remarkable about this person is that he's really engaged with us as students and with the study association. He always joins on our study trips, which gives our study trip a more educational perspective, but he's not only there for the educational perspective. He makes sure to sit down with the students, talk to them, get to know them. It's really nice to have a teacher who can be both really intelligent and good at his job, but at the same time really caring and kind.
What I really think is important in teaching business administration and organization design and development in particular is to take students on a learning journey and to show them how different theories work out in different organizational contexts. So a theory working in a factory setting, for example, may not work in a crisis management setting. Also, I really think it's important that you help students to learn and to give them constructive feedback and treat them as young adults on a learning journey. So I'm really honored to receive this prize, and I would really like to thank all the students and my colleagues for this fantastic moment.
Welkom in Bunnik. Ik ben Rianne van Melijk en ik werk als stadsgeograaf bij de sectie Geografie, Planologie en Milieu aan de faculteit der Managementwetenschappen. Ik geef les in de bachelor en master en als stadsgeograaf bespreek ik natuurlijk vaak stedelijke ontwikkelingen in wereldsteden zoals New York en Londen. En ik neem mijn studenten ook graag mee op excursie naar Berlijn, Glasgow en Tallinn. Maar even zo vaak heb ik het eigenlijk over stedelijke ontwikkelingen in plekken waar je misschien minder snel aan denkt, zoals mijn eigen woonplaats Bunnik. We staan hier bij nieuwbouwproject Rijnhagen, waar de komende tijd 91 nieuwe woningen gebouwd worden, waarvan 27 sociale huurwoningen. Hier van de 27 beschikbare woningen waren 1200 inschrijvingen. Wat aantoont hoe moeilijk het is om in Bunnik een woning te bemachtigen. Stedelijke theorieën en concepten zoals gentrification vind je dus echt niet alleen terug in steden zoals Amsterdam en Utrecht, maar ook in een dorp als Bunnik.
Het leuke aan de colleges van Rianne vind ik, is dat je haar gedurende haar colleges echt beter ligt kennen. En dat ze altijd persoonlijke anekdotes gebruikt uit ervaringen van haar eigen leven om je te helpen de collegestof beter te laten begrijpen. Zo weet ik nog steeds het verhaal over haar urbanisatie en daarna suburbanisatie van Horst naar Utrecht en nu naar Bunnik. En op een persoonlijk vlak ken ik Rianne ook ietsjes beter van de opleidingscommissie. En weet ik dat ze heel erg betrokken is bij de belangen van studenten. En daarom kan ik met 100% zekerheid zeggen dat ze deze prijs echt verdient.
Ik ben zeer vereerd met deze universitaire onderwijsprijs. Binnen de universitaire wereld gaat de aandacht vaak uit naar wetenschap. Maar in mijn ogen ontleent de universiteit zijn bestaansrecht feitelijk aan het zijn van een onderwijsinstituut. Goed en gepassioneerd onderwijs geven vind ik daarom heel erg belangrijk. En zou in mijn ogen meer erkend en gewaardeerd mogen worden, zoals met deze prijs gebeurt. En daarom ben ik heel erg blij om die te mogen ontvangen. Dankjewel.
Two wonderful winners of this education award, and I'm sure you're all even readier to start studying again. And this is for students, but maybe everybody else as well. A warm welcome to you all, of course, and time for the first cultural intermezzo. And then Daniel Wichbolders, who's the chair of the executive board of Radboud University, will speak to the winners of the study awards. But first of all, let us listen and watch three students who jointly do this intermezzo for us. Ilse Meijer, who is an artist with language, Hilde Remmers on her flute, and in the video you see Ilja Geelen.
There are 44 countries in the world where I can be arrested or even killed for loving women. For men that love men, it is even 72 countries. This year, I was in one of those countries to visit my family who lives there. Here, I first experienced what it feels like to not be free in expressing my identity. Unfortunately, it is very common also for people in the Netherlands to assume you are straight. But usually, in a conversation, when someone asks if I am dating a guy or if I have a boyfriend, I can just say, nope, no boyfriends or girlfriends. But in the country where I was, I had to stop myself at no, I don't. And if they asked why, or asked what my type was, who I'd been dating, if they could set me up, I could not freely give an honest answer. I was only there for 3 months, so I cannot even begin to imagine what people experience when they live in an environment their whole lives where they cannot freely and safely express themselves. I am also aware that not risking being arrested is not the same as feeling safe, accepted, and welcome. I am privileged in experiencing these things. Therefore, I want to emphasize that regarding my experience of freedom in the Netherlands, I am not speaking on behalf of the entire LGBTQI+ community, but only as a member with their own experience. I know that not everyone in the Netherlands, in Nijmegen, and at the university experiences this freedom in expressing that part of themselves. In the country where I was last year, where I could have been arrested for loving women, I was advised not to speak about gender because this would be too free of a topic. Later, when I came back, I read a fascinating article by Han van Krieken about gender identities across the world. Now I know that in Europe or the West, we are not as progressive and free as we might think when it comes to gender. As is common in the West, we think in dualisms like mind-body, nature-culture, and man-woman. Elsewhere in the world, this dichotomous thinking is not common at all. And when it comes to gender, there are countless histories speaking of people and cultures that see gender as a spectrum rather than a binary. The Navajo in North America, for example, knew 4 genders. The Buginese on South Sulawesi had names for 5 genders. And the idea that people are gender fluid is also visible in certain languages. In fact, because of colonialism, a certain freedom in self-expression through gender identities was violently repressed in other cultures. This means that, perhaps, where I was, I could have started talking about gender, especially considering that in their local languages, they do not distinguish pronouns in terms of gender. I now see how ethnocentric it was of me, that when people advised me not to talk about gender, I assumed that because they were against LGBTQI+, I could indeed not talk about gender at all. I have no idea what people would have said. Maybe it would not have been a fruitful conversation. But maybe I could have learned something. But I don't know because I did not try. I study philosophy, politics and society, and cultural anthropology, so I was and am disappointed in myself. If there is one thing that I have learned in my studies, is that there are many different perspectives, that you should not make assumptions and you should ask questions. Only then it becomes possible to really listen. But what did I do? I made an assumption and did not ask questions. But I have learned from this, and I hope that all of us will never stop reflecting and learning. So next time, when I visit my family, I will ask questions about gender, and I will listen to the different perspectives.
Dit is huidhonger, of niet?
Esto es arte, ¿o no lo es?
Dit is een ademhaling, toch?
Dit is huidhonger, of niet?
This is childhood. Isn't it? Isn't it?
C'est bien la mer, n'est-ce pas?
Das ist ein Segelboot, oder nicht?
È il vento, non è vero?
Dit is een ademhaling, toch?
Dit is huidhonger, of niet?
Esto es arte, ¿o no lo es? ¿O no lo es?
Dit is een ademhaling.
C'est bien la mer.
Dit is huidhonger.
This is
Esto es arte.
childhood.
Das ist ein Segelboot. Das ist ein Segelboot.
C'est bien la mer.
Of niet?
I already mentioned that I am privileged and experiencing certain freedoms regarding my sexuality. I am also privileged because I am white, highly educated, and straight presenting, and I am sure there are many more. When I say I'm privileged, I do not mean that I have certain things, but rather that there are things that I do not have. I face less barriers in life. And because privilege is the lack of barriers, it might be hard to see your own. What I mean to say with this is that you should not take your freedom for granted. Legally, we may be equal and free. This does not mean that everyone equally experiences freedom. The experience of freedom and the availability of opportunities is not universal. I will mention one more privilege. I'm standing here on this stage, which means I was somehow selected to give this speech to quite a significant audience, which is, I'm assuming, listening to what I have to say. So I have been given a voice. There are many different perspectives and different voices that are not being listened to. So my message is, listen. Do not make assumptions about people's experiences, but ask questions and listen to people around you, but also to people that are not around you, to the people outside of your bubble. I strongly believe that everyone is different. Everyone has their own unique experiences and view on the world. But at the same time, we are all the same in our humanness. We are equally worthy. And I think that it is both through these differences and through this shared humanness that we are connected. In order to make everyone feel safe, accepted, welcome, and free in this world, in order to make everybody feel at home in this world, we should listen. Thank you for listening.
Ilse Meijer, Hilde, Remmers, and Ilja Geelen, thank you for this wonderful contribution, beautiful and also important. Mine is the honor to be talking here to 4 winners of the University Education Awards. Ted van Aanholt, Afra de Mars, Ruben de Mulder, and Roel Takke are here at table with me. And can we just say you without the politer forms that we have in some languages, in Dutch, but not in English. So, congratulations. You all wrote theses of exceptional quality, and we're happy to talk together about those. And I'm starting with Ted. Blasius van Parma, who is that? Well, he was a philosopher who lived around the second half of the 14th century. He died 1416. We don't know exactly when he was born, but born in Parma and died there. And in his life, he was lecturer at various universities. Okay, and your thesis was about him, about his work. When's your interest in him? Well, the interesting thing about Blasius van Parma and other philosophers in that day and age is that we know very little about them. We don't know his date of birth. We barely know when he died. But one thing we do know is that he got into conflict with the church and the bishop of Pavia. And there's a short fragment in which we read that he was called in to account for himself and then had to promise that he would stick to the Catholic learning, the Catholic doctrine. And as a philosopher, that makes you interested in what might he have said in the past that had irritated the bishop. And so I looked at his work and in his work to see whether I could find any indications of what that was. The relationship between church and science has remained exciting to date. What was your challenge to write this thesis? Well, the biggest challenge I had is that I looked at 2 texts of his that are very alike. They both comment on Aristotle's physics, and it was very common to write comments on Aristotle at the time, especially, and since the 14th century, those texts were never published again, and so we only have the Latin manuscripts on parchment, old manuscripts. And so I started working to try and look at those manuscripts, work them out, and make them first accessible in Latin, subsequently to be able to analyze them. That was the biggest challenge, because I'd not done anything like that before I wrote my thesis. Wow, hard work, and in the end it led to a newspaper article in Trouw newspaper. True, and yes, unusual that for, well, dusty historical science and you know, an investigation in philosophy. There would be media interest. And now I'm officially a student again. I worked for a while last year, but now I'm learning at the Teacher Training Academy, and I'm going to start as in an internship as a trainee philosophy teacher, and I'm hoping to make that my profession. Wonderful. Thank you for that brief conversation, and good luck with that. And continuing on with Afra de Mars, who is from the Faculty of Arts. Afra, Sri Lanka, what can you tell me about it? Well, quite a bit about the history of the land use and land ownership in the second half of the 18th century there, because that is what my thesis is about. Using land registers, which are very much like the cadastral registry of today. I looked at who owned property and land in the suburbs of Colombo, and whether we could make any conclusions about gender, social background of those owners, and to see whether we could say anything about what had happened to plantations there and how they had come up, and whether people had trouble making ends meet based on the land they owned. Because if you say landowners, you may think of big English manor houses with land. But in those land registries, what we found was basically everybody. Some people owning almost no land, up to and including, you know, the big colonial people from the Netherlands. And what does that teach us for today? Because there's that whole debate about colonialization and periods in our past, very early aspects that you looked at now. What can they teach us today? Well, scientifically speaking, says Afra, mainly Indonesia was studied much from the Netherlands, but this is a different colony of the Netherlands, which most people may not know about. The Dutch were in Sri Lanka at some point. Not everybody knows this, and in terms of how my subject touched developments such as sub-organization and urbanization, and also the relationships between social groups that still play a significant part in Sri Lanka today. And then you see, says the interviewer, that things may go on until today and how long systems take. And we should acknowledge that. Now, the jury has called you a great archivist or somebody who's eaten archives, an archive rat. Well, I'm not offended by that, says Afra, but what do you find so attractive about archives? Well, you meet very extraordinary things sometimes. A little sentence may give you something that tells you so clearly about lives of big groups of people, and I think it's simply fascinating that of the 18th century, but also of earlier eras, so much have been saved, if only you know where to find it. To learn from the future, we must look at today. And thank you, Afra. What are your plans for the future? Well, since June, I've been working at the University of Maastricht, and I'm working on a PhD research about the oldest coal mine in the Netherlands, and how this has influenced the environment there and the landscape there. And I'm looking at a social component as well. I'm still finding out what I'm going to do. Well, and I'd love to ask you more, but unfortunately we don't have the time to do that. But good luck with your PhD in Maastricht, and we congratulate our colleagues in Maastricht getting their hands on you. And here is Ruben de Mulder, Faculty of Law. Crawling, that's more than just crawling creepily, right? Sneakily. Yes, crawling is a new method of investigation that the police is increasingly using, whereby, with the help of artificial intelligence, they find in public sources any information that might be significant for their investigation. And can they? Are they allowed? Well, yes, that would be your first idea, right? Because anything in the public domain is public, and so they can search it. But I looked at the right to privacy as well, and it turns out if you read it carefully, then the police cannot simply look around in those sources. There are definitely restrictions that they meet. And is that also the advice that we draw from your thesis, that it should not be done or cannot be done, and do they listen? Well, my advice to the legislator would be to create some legal grounds for this with good safeguards, because in fact it's not inadmissible or impermissible at this point. However, there can be specific circumstances. And of course, first you would have to have a suspect to try and crawl through information like that. And it was unique when you wrote your thesis that 2 faculties were involved, weren't they? So it was interdisciplinary in that sense. Can you tell us more about that? Well, indeed, I did a research master, which is a combination between Nijmegen and Groningen universities, that master. And there was some interdisciplinary requirement for my study, and I incorporated this by not just looking at the right to privacy, such as interpreted by the human rights courts, but also more to theoretical grounds. So it's quite a bit of philosophy in the thesis as well. Again, something very interesting. And what is going to be the next step for you? Well, I've now started a PhD study in the area of artificial intelligence and investigations, so rather broader than what I did for my thesis, but it touches on that same topic indeed. And I started doing that now and will continue for the time being. And it takes place where? It takes place here at Radboud University. Well, wonderful. Good luck with that. And once again, a fascinating topic. And that is also definitely true for our final student in this brief round of interviews. This is the award winner laureate of the Management Sciences faculty, Roel Takken. CRISPR, that's made me think of Nobel Prizes, medical, genetics. True, says Roel Takken. Most people think of that, but it is indeed a frustration out of which I wrote this thesis, because my initial observation was that CRISPR, which is a method to modify genetic material, is something that is going to greatly impact our near future, the coming 10, 20 years perhaps, but that inside my field and inside politics, but also philosophy and psychology, people were sort of nodding off a little bit. You know, whatever I read about it would stem from people in the medical profession, for example. Interesting stuff, but you do miss some aspects. And so I was wondering why nobody else would write about this. And it was a frustration that I was carrying around 3 years ago. And in my thesis, of course, I took my chance to do it. Okay, so in your mind, that was going on for a long time. And did you work towards that thesis? Well, yes, a little bit, because even in the pre-master, I wrote a brief essay about this. And my philosophy lecturer said at the time, that's interesting. That's interesting, but that was all you said, not much more. And so I started finding out what pitfalls there might be, because I was so interested in political aspects of this, because I thought, okay, if people can be genetically modified, then what limits will you set? What considerations should be made? And really, there wasn't a single survey or overview that had put all this together, and so I started writing about it. And how in the future might we prevent that such important questions behind technological developments are asked in good time and discussed together in good time? Well, I feel, also specifically in this case, that arts and sciences should communicate more. Because this had been clear for a long time, and all scientists or science students knew that this was coming, but not the art students. And there's that separation that there seems to be in the universities, which makes it impossible for all people to get that information and see how relevant it is. Well, that's a great opportunity for a university to break boundaries, of course, because there's an added value. And what is your future? Well, I started working in a working group in the past year, and I work at Apeldoorn now, but I'm yearning for something more intellectually challenging already. And so this next year I might see whether I can't find a PhD process somewhere. Okay, well, we're going to keep an eye on all four of you, Roel, Ted, Afra, Ruben. Thank you so much. And presently we will be talking to 3 other winners of the University Education Awards. But by now you have been seeing preparations for a wonderful choreography behind me. We are once again going to enjoy dance live on stage this time, which is extraordinary because this has not been presented live before. These students created this choreography and practiced it from behind their desks in their lockdown lockdown digs from behind a computer. And you see chairs play a part in this. It's exciting because here you see truly together this time Michel, Fransje, Marijn, Sarah, Rona, Harry and Caroline. And the choreographer is Fleur. Here is Student Dance Association from Nijmegen, Dansviva.
Ik ben misschien te laat geboren, of in een land van ander licht. Loop altijd wat verloren, al toont de spiegel mijn gezicht. En ik ken de kroegen en de kathedralen, van Amsterdam tot aan Maastricht. Toch zal ik elke dag verdwalen. Dat houdt de zaak in evenwicht. Laat me. Laat mij mijn eigen gang maar gaan. Laat me. Ik heb het altijd zo gedaan.
Ik zal mijn vrienden niet vergeten. Want wie me lief is, blijft me lief. En waar ze wonen moest ik weten, maar ik verloor hun laatste brief. Ik zal ze heus nog wel ontmoeten. Misschien vandaag, misschien over een jaar. Ik zal ze kussen en me groeten. Het komt vanzelf weer voor elkaar. Laat me mijn eigen gang maar gaan. Laat me. Ik heb het altijd zo gedaan.
Ik ben gelukkig niet verankerd. Soms woon ik hier, soms leef ik daar. Ik heb mijn leven niet verkankerd, ik heb geen bezit en geen bezwaar. En ik hou van water en van aarde. Hou van schamel en van duur. Er is geen stuiver die ik spaarde, ik leef gewoon van uur tot uur. Laat mij mijn eigen gang maar gaan. Laat me. Ik heb het altijd zo gedaan.
Ik zal ook een keertje sterven. Daar kom ik echt niet onderuit. Ik laat mijn liedjes dan maar zwerven. Verder zoek je het maar uit. Voorlopig blijf ik nog jou zangen. En geef ik alles wat ik heb. Ik blijf hier langer, liefst nog langer. Maar ik laat me blijven wie ik ben. Laat mij mijn eigen gang maar gaan. Laat me.
altijd zo willen doen.
Thank you, Dance Fever, for this beautiful and somewhat confronting performance, because I recognize the feeling that I get from this, from sitting behind our computers. Welcome to 3 more prize winners of the Radboud Study Prizes. Singe Yücel, Tije Boeien, Laurens Kuiper. Congratulations. Singe, let's start with you. What was your thesis about?
My thesis was about a highly aggressive type of cancer, which is the ovarian cancer. I studied one subtype of this cancer, high-grade serous ovarian carcinoma. This cancer type is unfortunately highly deadly because most of the women that are diagnosed, they are diagnosed at really late stages because they show really mild symptoms. And at that point, for most of them, there's not that much to do. And even the immunotherapy, maybe most of you must heard it by now, is one of the most effective cancer therapy at the moment, which is the boosting the immune system to fight against cancer. Even immunotherapy is not that efficient in these cancer patients. So in my research, I tried to understand why these patients are not responding to immunotherapy. First of all, we took an approach to generate new models to be able to study this cancer type, because unfortunately also there was not any good models to study this cancer type. All of the current models were originating from different cell types. Actually, it's been shown a long time ago that ovarian cancer was originating from different cell types. So we didn't even have the good models to study this cancer.
No.
So the lab that I joined, they first generated the new models to be able to study this malignancy. Then with these models in hand, I tried to understand why these cancer patients are not responding to immunotherapy. Then we could find that there was one molecule called follistatin. When we see the higher expression of this molecule, there was no response to immunotherapy. And then we could abrogate the small expression of this molecule, and with this approach, we could sensitize the mice models bearing ovarian cancer. So they were, after this treatment, they were completely tumor-free for really long term.
Oh wow, that's impressive.
Thank you.
And the lab that you studied this was at MIT, or
yes.
not? Yes.
Yes.
So during these COVID times, you went all the way to MIT to study this. That must be quite a challenge.
Yes, it was really challenging. I went there in October and COVID broke in March. And I was quite worried in the beginning that I cannot continue my research. I was really worried. But then I was lucky enough to get a special permission, so I could still go to lab. Even though it wasn't the ideal situation, of course, I was usually alone in the lab with my mice. But still, I'm glad that I could at least continue my research there.
Yeah. And for the mice, you did not need to wear a mouth cap? Or?
No.
No. So what's your next step?
I already started my PhD in another beautiful country, Switzerland. I'm working with Professor Doug Hanahan. Over there, I'm working with pancreatic cancer and breast cancer models to be able to understand a neuronal pathway that I discovered a couple years ago that plays a huge role in tumor progression and metastasis. At the moment, I'm trying to generate conditional mice models for these cancer types to be able to really understand how this mechanism works, so we can hopefully then abrogate the mechanism to make therapy for the patients.
Yeah, so your knowledge of mice also helps there again.
Yes.
Well, I wish you all the best with your PhD in Switzerland. And thank you for being here for this interview.
Thank you.
Those were the medical sciences. We now move on to the social sciences. Tije Boeien, thank you also for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Teachers and their expectations.
Yes.
What about them?
What about them? Well, they have a really important self-fulfilling prophecy effect on the academic achievement growth of their students. So if you look at teachers with high expectations, high expectations for the students, you can see those students reach more goals in a year or over a couple of years. But when teachers have low expectations, for example, from children with a low socioeconomic background or with a migration background, it can restrain their development. And it's a very important thing because it plays on a really individual level in the classroom. So that was my subject of my thesis.
Yeah, and we are talking about young children here, of course,
yes.
who are still developing themselves, primary school. So yes. The expectations of the teachers are crucial there. Do teachers differ?
That was the big question. The self-fulfilling prophecy effect has been studied for over 5 decades already, and research have been arguing for a couple of decades as well if there are significant differences between teachers and these effects they have on their students. So, for example, do we see classes with teachers where this effect is enormous, and if you have high expectations, they grow exponentially, and do we see classrooms with teachers where this self-fulfilling prophecy effect doesn't exist? My thesis was all about this several kind of differences between teachers, and I conclude actually quite the opposite, that there is no difference between teachers in this effect. So the biggest important message is the self-fulfilling prophecy effect is a really human thing. Every teacher has to be aware of the negative effects of low expectations and the positive effects of high expectations.
We all fall prey to this.
Yes, definitely. It's a really human thing.
Yeah. Well, that's something to be aware of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have great examples in your own history as a student?
Well, definitely my supervisor, Eddie Denissen, who had high expectations of me. That's the reason why I'm sitting here today, I think. So for me personally, he has been an inspiration. And I have a background as a teacher of mathematics for a couple of years. So I've been teaching students, and I'm a teacher educator now at the Radboud Teacher Academic on the Radboud University. And I'm teaching students to become high school teachers themselves. So for me, it's all about education and inspiring the next generation of teachers. And I can really use my thesis with that.
Well, a very important message once more from one of our thesis students here. You also, as most of the students here, were very active with other things besides your study. Maybe nice to mention here, you were the secretary of the big band that we are listening to today,
yes,
or not?
Yes, thank you. A shout out to the big band behind us. Been a really big part of my student time here at Radboud University. So
yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Which also shows how important that is, of course.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
We move to the Faculty of Science, finally. Laurens Kuiper, welcome here.
Thank you.
Database query optimization.
Yes.
Can you explain even to me what that is?
I'll try to keep it brief. But optimization in general means when you query a database, you want the result to be there fast, and you can do many, many things to optimize this. And what I did research into is when you combine information from multiple tables, this is called a join. You join tables together. There are many different orders in which you can join tables. If you have 10 tables, you can have many, many different orders. And it's up to the optimizer in the system to choose a efficient order. If you join 2 very large tables together, this will be much slower than joining 2 small tables together. Picking a wrong order can mean the difference between having the result to your query in a couple of milliseconds or minutes, seconds, even longer. So the optimizer usually picks one plan, sticks to it, and executes the query, giving you the result. But it can make wrong predictions in how big the result will be. And if you would execute the plan in steps, you can adapt. If you have an intermediate result that is much bigger than you expected it to be, you can maybe move this later down the plan and try to stick to the small tables first, which will mean the result will be there much quicker.
So I think that there are many companies interested in this. If they can speed up this process, time is money, of course.
Yes. Yes, so it's a very big market. So database systems is a very big market. I think recently the Snowflake has been sold for billions. But I'm not in here for the money, of course. I'm in here for the research. And speeding up these queries is a good way to save energy as well. So many systems run in the cloud, and you pay per minute or per how much electricity you're spending there. And if you speed this up, of course, yes, it's good for everyone.
Well, I'm very impressed that you have resisted the billions and now have chosen to stay in science as well. So what's your next step?
So I'm very excited about my next step. Right after my thesis defense, the people who made DuckDB, which was the system I implemented my ideas in, they approached me about a position. So DuckDB is made at CWI. It's the National Institute for Mathematics and Computer Science in Amsterdam. And I'm very happy to have been working there for almost a year now, so since October, and been doing things in DuckDB ever since. So it's very exciting.
Well, thank you very much, and all the best with your PhD as well.
Yes,
we are very impressed and proud of these students that won our study prizes. Again, Singe, Tije, Laurens, thank you very much, and also the students from the previous table. I give the floor back to our rector.
Wonderful, isn't it? If you look at the breadth and width of subjects studied at our university, but even more wonderful to see students who really show their passion, their curiosity. Simply wonderful. And it is part of freedom, isn't it? Freedom. Well, this is the theme of our celebration today and of this academic year as well. And it's a wonderful word, isn't it? It makes your heart sing. But what does it really mean? There is a well-known dichotomy which were made by Isaiah Berlin long ago, and I think Ilse Meijer would say, well, dichotomies are no longer of this time. We must think in more dimensions, and undoubtedly she's right. But he distinguished something that did help us further. He distinguished negative and positive freedom. Very succinctly put, the freedom to be allowed to do what you want and the freedom to be able to do what you want. Annelien de Dijn, in her recent book about freedom, mainly focused on the political aspect of this. The government, which we choose in the Netherlands, also takes our liberties sometimes. We can't simply do everything we want, and generally we deal with this well enough. We stay positive, we stick to the rules, but we also see, and she warns for this, a movement where that chosen government, and we see this especially in America, is viewed no longer as something that belongs to us. It is seen as the enemy, and maybe a big threat to our democracy lurks in that. And the restrictions imposed upon us in the past 18 months generally were stuck to very, very well, complied with. Of course, in the media, we heard exceptions to this. And there were some cases in which we could no longer do what we wanted to do. Could not, were not allowed to, because we wanted to protect others and were unable to. This was for some people who were ill, and unfortunately many people died. And they can't do and will not be allowed to do anything any longer. Today's year, academic year, starts with much more freedom to study together and to work together, which is a good step forward. But let's not forget, there are still many people who are vulnerable and many people are still worried. They too must experience freedom, and we must all consider that. There is clearly also freedom not to come to campus for now. And whatever we do, we must find a new way of working, and there are risks in that. Risks, of course, in the further distribution of this virus, but we'll also see that there is a long period in which many people still get it and we can still do more and more. And this is a field of tension, maybe because we might have much more flu. Also, because there might be, and I'm worried about this, a much larger number of burnouts. But I want to look away from the coronavirus and the various issues and look at the restrictions we experience in the Netherlands. We live pretty much in a free country. We heard this from Ilse as well. We can say a lot and do a lot, should not perhaps say everything that we're allowed to say. But can everybody enjoy that freedom? Radboud University was founded less than 100 years ago, well, very nearly, actually to promote the liberty of the underprivileged Catholics in the Netherlands in that day and age. They did not feel part of the entire society of the Netherlands, and they thought education was key, and rightly so. But also, these days, there are still people who don't always experience freedom. Ilse spoke to us about this. They may not feel it based on the place where they were born, the color of their skin, their gender, their sexuality or religion. There's all sorts of reasons why people may feel they're not entirely free or at liberty to say what they want to say. But of course, you should be able to at a university. And it's essential that at Radboud University, at any rate, we create in freedom a safe space in which you can express yourself, but can also hear what may not suit you and learn to deal with opinions that you might not agree to and about which you may debate and discuss together. And like Ilse said, this starts with listening. And this was the theme of the academic year 2 years ago, also for a very good reason. And there's another important cause for not being able to do things, not having the right talent or education to make it in this, our complicated society. About 10 to 15% of Dutch people are not sufficiently literate to keep up in our society. I think that's a large number. And in our society, they are sometimes forgotten. In our society, people look up in surprise if a theater person or a popular singer say something interesting or turn out to be very smart. We think education rules everything, and so we've created gaps between people. Much has been said and written about this, but maybe not enough has been done about it. Next year, there's going to be the third round of the Growth Fund, a lot of money made available by the government to keep society in the Netherlands solid and firm and future-proof. And in the first 2 rounds, much money was spent on technological solutions, medical solutions, education. But because of the problem I have just outlined, I would call upon our scientists, together with your colleagues, to set up a huge program to truly do something to low literacy and the various gaps between the various groups in our society, because I think that will increase the liberty and freedom of many. I hope we can do that. Thank you very much. Time for music. And we will listen again to the big band. And they will play Spain by Chicoria. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Kees on drums, Marieke on flute, Roy bass guitar, Hendrik keys, Wendy and Nout trumpet, Philip and Roberto trombone, Cas bass, Martin saxophone, and in front of them, Berend, who is the laureate of the Student Award. Student Big Band Nijmegen, ladies and gentlemen.
What an energy. Thank you. Big band, Studenten Big Band Nijmegen, fantastic. And now the Internationalisation Award, by which we each year give special recognition to projects that contribute to the internationalization of Radboud University. First, an honorable mention that goes to First Things First, a book, an experience book that describes how to try to get an international classroom. A must-read for colleagues dealing with international classrooms. And I really would like to congratulate the three persons you see behind me. Liedeke Plate, Sandy Barassa, and Daniela Bianchino. And now to the winner of the Internationalisation Award of Radboud University this year. And they will be presented to you in this film.
RITA is a postgraduate training program, and it's meant for people who work for or with people with high abilities. We know that underachievement is a big problem, and that especially those people who are most talented do underachieve. And that's why we think that people who complete the RITA will change education and care for all people, including those who are most talented.
We need to train our teachers, psychologists and caregivers to recognize and nurture our highly able children and adults.
And that's exactly what RITA offers. The Radboud International Training on High Ability offers the opportunity to become a RITA practitioner or specialist in gifted education. Together with our students, we focus on research, but we also discuss questions with practitioners in the field, all over the world. Our blended program offers offline meetings,
but largely takes place online. This way, we cross borders and let professionals from various backgrounds and disciplines learn from each other. Our program improves learning outcomes of students all over the world. We're building an international community while reducing the need to travel.
As a RITA specialist, I'm now part of an international network with experts on talent development and giftedness who never stop learning.
For a brighter future and a better world.
Wonderful. And my congratulations to Lianne Hogeveen, Sven Matthijssen, Envy Len, Lonneke Luiks en Monique Schijvenhuis. Het is een groot genoegen voor mij.
It is a great pleasure for me now to present to you Esther Gerritsen, because it's been long-standing practice at this university to ask an interesting writer to say something at the opening of our academic year. Esther Gerritsen, I'm sure, is known to many of you. She writes columns, books and scenarios. She won, among other things, here in Nijmegen the Frans Kerendonk Award, and 4 times was nominated for the Libraries Literature Award. And moreover, she was born in Nijmegen. So here she is, ladies and gentlemen, Esther Gerritsen. Some 30 years ago, I was a freshman. And I remember the first day of my studies so clearly. I even know the words of the director who spoke to us that day. I was going to Utrecht Theatre School, and they received us in a theatre. And I was full of blissful expectancy, because I was going to go into a new world in which finally I would meet people like-minded who would love theatre and books as much as I did. And, you know, in those days I'd not seen many theatres from the inside. I'd not grown up with them, but I had a clear image of them. And the room in which they received us was not good enough, I didn't think. There were dark blue theatre curtains, why not red, I wondered, were drawn aside all the way so that you could see the very ugly back wall a brick wall with pipes and cable, and there was a window that was simply open so you could see the trees on the square outside. There were tube lights and daylights shining on a filthy floor, and there was no magical theatre lights, whereas I saw those lights up there. And when I came in, there was already a man in jeans on the stage, or what had to pass as a stage. There was just no coming in from behind the curtains. And that man in jeans turned out to be the director, who said welcome, or headmaster, who said welcome, and told us why the theatre looked so barren that day. He said, we mustn't close our eyes to the outside world. The theatre should not be a place of refuge. Theatre must be part of life. And he told us not to make theatre in beautiful halls, but in the street, in location. On location, on site, he said it was, at schools, in ports, in factories and sheds. There we'd have to make theatre, where you didn't expect it. But he said exactly what I didn't want to hear. Surely I hadn't come to a theatre not to have it look like a theatre. But he went further. He said, we don't turn away from normal people here, the common people. And in fact, in those days, terms like that were used more readily than today. Nobody wondered at the time what the common man was. I didn't. We have to take the theatre to ordinary folk, he said. And I thought, well, I've just come from there. Why go back there? And what he mainly meant with the common man, it turned out to be people who didn't really want to go to a theatre. Well, I knew plenty of those people. Who doesn't? And I still remembered really well what it had been like to take your complaining classmates to some sort of presentation or show. There was nothing fun about it. And now I was here in that world with like-minded persons, and I was told that I could make theatre, but I was having to go back to those complaining classmates. That sounded like back to scratch. And this on the day on which I thought my life had to start anew. Barely had I found my like-minded persons, or I had to go back to those unwilling, because even now, apparently, I already knew better than they what was good for them. Well, mildly speaking, this was very confusing, but the man kept repeating, we were not going to make theatre for each other. And if the word bubble had existed at the time, I'm sure he would have told us to get out of it. But I'd only just got there. I had to find the bubble and get in it first, before I could get out again. And because his words suited me so poorly, I shoved them to the back of my mind. And to say out loud that indeed I wanted to hide out in the theatre is something I couldn't do, because I just heard that that was not okay. I didn't even dare think it. I wanted to feel at home here. I wanted to agree. I wasn't looking for conflict or dichotomy, debate, not even looking for my opinion. I didn't want to agree or disagree with my teachers and lecturers. I just wanted to learn something. I was looking for craftsmanship, kinship, inspiration, art, aesthetics, knowledge. And they were many, many steps beyond what I needed and wanted, all that I heard that day. I couldn't think about the role of theatre and art in society if I didn't know anything about theatre. It was as though I was going to write a newspaper to get to know something, and all I found was letters to the editors. Where was the original article they were responding to? And so during that freshman year, I tried to ignore the views of my teachers a lot. I simply wanted to learn how to play a play, how to direct it, make it up, how to write a play. I wanted knowledge. And they would say, but what is knowledge? And I would say, I don't want questions, I want answers. And then they would say, aren't questions more interesting than answers? So was that the spirit of the time? Was it inherent to an art education, performing arts? I'm wondering. And that desire for knowledge has never disappeared. The frustration hasn't disappeared, because I switch on the television for a background program about the housing market, and it may be very well that the presenter first of all asks me whether Dutch citizens expect that the situation will worsen in the coming time or improve, and what percentage has no idea of what will happen. And maybe that will teach me something about the mood of Dutch people. But it teaches me nothing about the housing market. I think they should survey who wants to hear what people who really know something about something think about it, and who would rather listen to the ideas of arbitrary passers-by. And I suspect that most people will say they just want to know something. Knowledge is simple, but it's absolutely precious. You can share it without exhausting it. You'd have to tell each other a day long only what you know, not what you think. That would broaden everybody's world, and at the end of the day, you would be wiser. You can always think something about it tomorrow. When my daughter was 4, once just before she went to sleep, she said, "Mom, I'll never be bad again." And so she was working on her knowledge about good and evil. And what should I have said? "Well done, baby. You really understood it." Well, I didn't say this because I thought, well, that sounds, it's a bit of a pity, as though she can never be bad again. So already I was giving nuance to it, detail. I already had a view on it. And so I said, well, you can be bad some of the time. And she heard it. So what did she do? She struck me in the face. She'd never done this before. But, well, she had just listened to me, and Mom should know. And so I couldn't really reprimand her. But I did learn from this. Because if you're 4, you just want to hear what you can and cannot do. It's got to be clear. No nuances, no liberty to do something with this yourself. That comes later. Constantly, children ask parents, "Tell me what you know, not what you're in doubt about." And as a student, that is what I ask my teachers as well. And if there's anything I hated throughout my school career, age 4 through 24, was working together. Working groups, making something with people who knew as little about it as I did, nobody in charge, nobody knowing better, and who, incidentally, knew a little better would always do best not to show it because the others wouldn't like it. I myself mainly learned very well to make friends of my co-students. It's important to learn to work together. You have to do this in practice. And that is the eternal argument, of course. But in retrospect, I have to think, can't you do it in your leisure time, at basketball? We can debate in a pub, can't we? Can't we, during our studies, simply only gather knowledge? And then we'll see what happens later on. Now, I know that knowledge is not written in stone. It's something that develops. But even that can be learned. You can learn what we know now and what they thought they knew before, and what the debates today are about. That is knowledge too. Should you learn to think critically, listen critically, ask questions? Where I would say, first you learn to listen, then you learn to listen critically. Asking questions, not a problem. Exchanging views, that's something different. Now, as an experiment, might we not just study for 4 years without views and opinions, without working groups, a ban on working groups, where teachers share what they know and students can ask anything? The promise is that they will always get an answer. And then in your leisure time, you may think what you like, work with whom you like, and be in as many working groups as you can make up. But there is a stronghold, a bubble, a fortress that you visit voluntarily and where you're immersed in knowledge, as Obelix in a barrel full of magic potion. And then, for a specialization, you can give your own twist to things. And let's not forget, there's a whole life to follow, to have views on everything, to be irritated with your colleagues, and to know better. Thank you, Esther Gerritsen. And I hope the theatre where you are today did help those disappointments of those first disappointments in theatres where you were received. And your words are very interesting to discuss with our students. And presently, let me say something about a book in which we can read, among other things, that to doubt knowledge, you have to work really hard, because you'd have to have it, that knowledge, first of all. And that sort of links into what you say. But once you have knowledge, I think to think about it together is also a beautiful element. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I already said it. We're nearing the end of our ceremony, and today we have the publication of this book, which is called A Healthy Society, written by many scientists at our university from many different disciplines. So this is multi-interdisciplinary, and they thought and have written about what is really a healthy society and what is a healthy university. And I think it's a book full of knowledge, but it also may raise many questions. The book is here for everybody who is studying at our university or working here, and they can get a free copy from today at the various doors of the various buildings at the university. And those who don't go there can let us know, and we will send them a copy. And of course, you can purchase it in the bookshop as well. Now, there's something else and special at the start of the year. A very positive message we heard last week was that Bart Jacobs, who is Professor of Cybersecurity, Privacy and Identity, will receive the very prestigious Simon Stevin Award, named for a very special Dutch scientist. And I heard that Bart was very, very pleased also to be the first mathematician receiving this award. So great congratulations to Bart Jacobs. Everybody at our university is very proud. And then, finally, let me thank most warmly everybody who's collaborated in this ceremony, the musicians, the speakers, the students who talk together, and of course the chair of the executive board, everybody behind the scenes, the cameras, the buttons and the switches. Thank you so much, and I hope it has given everybody at home as much inspiration as it has hopefully given everybody here, but definitely me. And let's make it a beautiful new academic year. And if you want to look back at what we did this afternoon, then you can visit the website of the university. And now please rise for prayer.
Gratias tibi agemus, omnipotens Deus, pro omnibus beneficiis tuae, qui vivis et regnas, per omnia saecula saeculorum.